All right, let's talk base building. DayZ itself has expanded the limited base building options the DayZ mod presented, and I specifically refer to DayZ mod, not any offshoots. DayZ mod had one type of tent, as you recall, the pup tent, and it had, off the top of my head, it had the pup tent, it had some razor wire that didn't seem to stop infected, it had tank traps, which I did like for vehicle roadblocks, and it had sandbags, and I'm pretty sure that was it. So we currently have 3 types of tents. We have the barrels for multiple uses. That's storage, fireplace and lighting, clothing dye, leather tanning, and storing fluids, which will be a future addition. But I hope to see players to be able to stockpile both fuel and water at their bases. Upgradable fireplaces, horticulture, farming, containers, backpacks. And what we have here is some concept art for what we're looking to do with one of the types of bases. One of the big things for me that I noticed looking at feedback from players on Reddit and on the forums and on Twitter is people seem to believe, and I think I hit this in a note further on, it's not a base without walls. I actually talked to some of the guys over at Portalarium in Austin. They do Shroud of the Avatar, and they agree the same thing. People don't really believe it is a base until you put walls up around it, and then it's a base. So we said, well, how can we allow people to fortify their bases? And what you see here is a concept based upon some discussions Peter and I had. The improvised camp is something he was pretty passionate about, and it goes off the concept of rolling out a construction kit. Let's say you put down some basic resources and you start adding into that and you'll start building up things. And we have improvised walls that will be based upon sheet metal and 2x4s. We have improvised towers you see up there with pallets and 2x4s and sheet metal that you can reinforce. We're hoping to put in some other items you see at the next concept art, like generators, floodlights, and so on and so forth, so you can start to actually reinforce that camp. Next up, we have kind of the militarized version of that. And what you see surrounding here is called a HESCO barrier. It's one of the first things I thought of when I thought about how we could introduce reinforced base building in DayZ without having to put in something that felt like it fit, right? And we have a bunch of military camps, both NATO and Eastern, and all of them use what we call HESCO barriers. It's something you'll see in forward operating bases deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's a fairly easy thing to set up. It just takes a little time. Those boxes come flattened, and you essentially pop it out, and you just backfill it with dirt, rocks, debris, so that it stops shrapnel and gunshots and so on and so forth. We want to allow at least 2 tiers of this stacked so that you can make walls that you can look over. So if you need to be able to shoot over your walls, you can. And within this same picture, you'll see we have the generators and the floodlights operating, so you can cover your area with light and illuminate, as well as different. These survivors have set up different tiers of the towers to give themselves overwatch outside their base. I want to point something out, though. I want to go back to this last slide. I don't know what my concept artist was thinking. That looks like an airfield. Who would set up a base by an airfield? That is crazy, and it's not even a military camp. It's an improvised camp. That's just begging to get raided. So yeah, it's important for us that players are able to reinforce their camps against gunshots and attacks, feel safe in their base, but also that when they do this, it doesn't look obtrusive. I don't want to see people building towers into the sky. There's going to be a Z-space ceiling and so on and so forth. I want it to look like it belongs. That's very important, that it doesn't pull you out of the game, like run into the forest and see somebody's made a wooden hut that's 6 stories high. This makes no sense. It looks stupid, at least to me. I want it to feel like it belongs in DayZ, and I think that these 2 concept arts kind of show the direction that we're taking with this, how we want base building to work. Just a couple quick slides here, or points here. Again, it's not a base without walls, and that was important, that if we're going to expand upon what you can put in the base with the generators, the lamps, the storage caches, that you be able to protect it. And we need to be able to support an easy way for you guys to refresh this large base. For those that weren't paying attention or didn't have time to look at the status report, the last few ones we put out, we talked about the life time, how long things last and persistence, because obviously I don't want people to be able to fill up a public server with 1 million tents and it just never gets cleaned up and they never come back. We don't want that kind of crap cluttering the server, I should say. So we do have tiered lifetimes on objects and their time to the persistence. So most items on 5.8 have a 30-minute lifetime, meaning if they haven't been touched or interacted by a player in 30 minutes, they'll get cleaned up and another item will spawn somewhere else to replace that item's number on the server. When it comes to base building objects, they have a much longer lifetime. Right now on 5.8, we've set that to 45 days because we don't yet have the tech to allow you guys to refresh it easily by interacting with it. But by 5.9, we hope to allow players, when it comes to their tents and containers, that all you have to do is interact with it. Move an item, drop an item in there, it's refreshed. And it doesn't have to be you. It could be anybody refreshing your base so it doesn't get cleaned up. But obviously as the base expands with walls and things like barrels and generators and weapon caches, there needs to be an easy way for people to refresh that without having to go to each and every item, and that's just ridiculous. So we're looking at technology that will allow us for you guys to refresh a base rather than every item in the base. Again, no base is impenetrable. I don't want people to put up this giant fortress and then another player comes across it and there's no way for them to get in. It has to be, DayZ's a permadeath game, and that means loss, and you need to be able to be vulnerable to that loss at all times. You should be able to protect yourself to higher tiers, but there should always be a way for that other guy to take your stuff if you're not aggressive in protecting it. So that ties into, you need to be careful where you set it up, not next to an airfield. The larger the camp is, the harder it's going to be to hide and defend. And again, it's a well-known fact that in DayZ you should not get attached to your gear. Now moving into this, we're going to talk about soft skills and what that means for DayZ. And this could either end up in you guys wanting to lynch me or you guys thinking it's a cool idea. But I think it's something we need to talk about and see what everybody thinks. So not getting attached to your gear led to the value of a character itself being trivial once he lost your gear. Like, how do you keep a player going if everything he has been taken? Someone handcuffs him halfway through the map, takes all his shit and leaves him naked. How do we keep that guy playing that character? That's important. Like, I want him to continue, him or her. I want him to continue. So soft skills and character lifespan is intended to help curtail this. Character lifespan is going to provide a visual representation of the age of your player's character. Exactly how we expand upon that, we want to look at facial hair, maybe facial scars, that kind of stuff. Obviously, we're not going to be able to go into big, bushy, Duck Dynasty beards. It's going to clip things too much. But there's a happy medium in there, I think, between a fresh shaven face and the 5 o'clock shadow and starting to get into that kind of pedicured beard and then getting in kind of like a lumberjack chic kind of thing. And then, of course, scars and dirt and mud and so on and so forth. Because obviously one of the things we had to look at, the reason why we didn't even look into this earlier, was how do we get this to work for female characters too? Because obviously they're not going to be growing big old bushy beards. And that's where things like scars and dirty face and such goes into things. And we also want to allow people to be able to remove that, to change that, to try and pass themselves off maybe as a different person or somebody that's fresh spawned. So you should be able to go and wash your face and get rid of the beard and so on and so forth. Although scars will be much harder to hide. Soft skills allow us to grow what a person's character is. And it's very important that you understand moving forward that for me, soft skills can never, ever be allowed to replace something that would be touched by player ability. That would completely kill what DayZ is for me. The only things we can touch with soft skills are things that your personal skill has no impact on. We'll talk a bit about that here in the next slide. So breaking down survivor activities that are not determined by player skill into set groups that can kind of define what your character is. Obviously, I don't want to pigeonhole people into specific classes, I personally was more of a fan of, say, Star Wars Galaxies and Ultima Online character development than, say, World of Warcraft or EverQuest, which are great games, don't get me wrong. I still play WoW. I love it. It's just I prefer skill-based over class-based. So we have things like, a medic, a farmer, a mechanic, a hunter, so on and so forth. You could still define what your character was by that skill set in games like Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies without it being pigeonholed into a class. You could have, I guess conceptually, you could have a tank mage that baked bread in Ultima Online, technically. And we want to allow that to a certain degree. I love Austin. As particular skills raise, faster actions, higher yield, less materials used, and less tools damage taken. And by this I mean kind of the reward you get from gaining these skills is, say, for example, cleaning a weapon or repairing an item, or maybe even transfusing blood would occur quicker if you were better at it. Obviously, if you're a fresh spawn character and you want to transfuse someone with the proper blood type, I think you would be a little bit quicker at doing this, your character, his animations, if you've done it 50, 60 times, rather than if your character's never done this before. And the same thing, we look into higher yield and less materials used. If you're scavenging for resources, maybe you'll find more sticks or more wood from something, or more harvestable crop from your horticulture if you do it more often. I'll do a Q&A right after we're almost done. And of course, less tool damage taken, because if you use a repair kit, like a sewing kit on an item, the more you use it, the more damaged it gets, and then you have to find another one. If you're much better at this, if your character has done this a lot of times, obviously you're going to damage that kit a lot less. And characters themselves, outside of skills, should be rewarded with more stamina the longer they're alive and the more they travel across the map. Once we get into the player stamina system, obviously it's going to impact how long, time-wise, you can full-on sprint, based upon the weight of items on you, how long you've been doing it. The longer your character's alive, the more he does it, I think the further your character should be able to sprint. And experience points gathered, and this is very important, this is at least on a design standpoint, experience points gathered should scale up within a given skill set as a different scale of items are used. By that I mean, let's say you're using rags to stop bleeding, maybe that gives you a 1 point. Whereas you look at maybe a medical bandage or transfusing blood gives you 2 or 3 points. The impact of what you're doing within a given skill set should yield a little more points. And obviously the next big thing that's going to be really important on the design side for the designers to tackle is ensuring, and this happened a lot in Ultima Online, soft skills raise according to time in game and time spent performing said action. Essentially what I mean is we've got to make sure that we put a limitation that both allows you to gain a rewarding amount of points from your time doing this, but we don't want people to just, sit there macroing bandage while their friend punches them to make them bleed for 12 hours. Like, that's not fun. That's not fun at all. We want people to actually be performing these actions and gain the skills. So we'll more than likely look at something that locks off how much you can gain per day per type skill, so that you're going to have to spend that time in-game performing these actions. We'll probably look at making sure that you can't reward points immediately after, like hammering a transfused blood or so on and so forth. It's going to be an uphill battle, and we're going to have to use experimental to try and mold it around how people play DayZ, to get it as close as possible to a functioning system that can't be gamed. And skills, again, I said this before, but they should never supplant player skill or directly affect combat. Yeah, there we go. That means reloading speed, hand sway, hold breath, none of that stuff should be hit by a system that you have no control over. You should have the same chance to win a gunfight as a fresh spawn than a completely military geared character, because in the end that's up to you guys, and we should never step in when player skill can be used, ever. It makes it I don't enjoy that kind of game. We made it through, and I didn't talk as much as I thought I would.